Welcome back to the entire history of London, Part 2, continuing from Tudor London. Tudor London. By 1500, London's population has climbed back to roughly 50,000. Then it simply takes off. By 1600, it's around 200,000. By 1650, nearing 400,000, making it, by some distance, the largest city in Europe. A huge driver of that growth. Henry VIII. When the Pope refuses to annul his first marriage in the 1530s, Henry breaks England away from the Catholic Church entirely, declares himself head of a new Church of England, and dissolves the monasteries across the country. In London, the Church had owned enormous tracts of land that suddenly floods onto the market. Courtiers and merchants buy it up and build grand new townhouses, and the city, hemmed in for centuries, finally has room to spread. Under Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I, London becomes something new again, a cultural capital. In 1599, the Globe Theatre opens on the south bank of the Thames, and a playwright fills it with unforgettable tragedies and dramas. Theatre-going becomes a genuinely democratic pastime. A laborer could stand in the open yard for a penny, while wealthier patrons paid more for covered seating, and for a few hours, the whole social order of the city sat shoulder to shoulder watching the same story unfold. Meanwhile, English ships are returning from the New World and from Asia loaded with profit, and in 1600 a group of London merchants charters the East India Company, quietly laying the first brick of an empire that won't fully unwind for over 300 years. But this booming Tudor city carries a dangerous flaw. It's built almost entirely from timber, with thatched roofs, narrow lanes, and upper stories that lean out so far they nearly touch across the street. Open hearths and candles burn in every home. London, for all its new wealth, is essentially kindling waiting for a spark. Stuart London, that spark, and that disease, both arrive within 12 months of each other in the 1660s. In 1665, plague returns to London with brutal force. At its peak, roughly 7,000 Londoners are dying every single week. Anyone with the means to leave flees to the countryside. The poor, with nowhere else to go, are trapped inside the dying city. By the time it finally burns itself out, somewhere close to 100,000 people, about a quarter of London's entire population, are dead. Then, on the 2nd of September, 1666, after a long, parched summer, a fire breaks out in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane. Fed by timber houses, thatched roofs, and strong winds, it spreads faster than anyone can contain it. Londoners try bucket chains and primitive fire hooks to pull down houses in its path, but the blaze simply outruns every effort. For 4 days, London burns. Roughly 85% of the walled city is destroyed. 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches, and the medieval St. Paul's Cathedral gone. Its lead roof said to have melted and run through the streets like water. Astonishingly, only a handful of people are confirmed to have died in the flames themselves. But well over 100,000 are left homeless, camping in fields outside the city in the weeks that follow. The architect Christopher Wren sees an opening, a chance to redesign London from scratch, with wide boulevards and open piazzas in the classical style. His plan is almost entirely rejected. Property boundaries are too tangled, and the need to rebuild too urgent to start over from a blank map. Most streets simply follow their old medieval lines. But new building codes now require brick and stone instead of timber and thatch. And Wren does get one great commission: a new St. Paul's Cathedral, its dome completed in 1710, which still dominates the skyline today. Georgian London. The 18th century turns London into a capital of ideas as much as commerce. Coffee houses become the social network of their day, places where news, gossip, and speculation circulate faster than any newspaper, sorted loosely by trade and interest. So a merchant, a poet, or a politician each had their preferred house to haunt. One of them evolves into a major insurance market. Another becomes the seed of the London Stock Exchange. The city is also becoming the headquarters of an empire in the making. In 1735, Robert Walpole becomes the first prime minister to take up residence at 10 Downing Street. In 1761, King George III buys a private townhouse for his family, the building that will eventually grow into Buckingham Palace. London is expanding physically too. After nearly 6 centuries with only a single crossing, Westminster Bridge finally opens in 1750, followed by Blackfriars Bridge in 1769. And after Napoleon's defeat in 1815, Britain stands as the dominant power on Earth, and London becomes the place where the resulting wealth concentrates. Banking houses, trading firms, shipping lines, all fed by profits flowing in from colonial trade. Victorian London. The growth numbers alone are staggering. In 1801, London's population is just over 1 million. By 1851, it's 2.5 million. By 1901, it's 6.5 million. The largest city anywhere on the planet. The Victorians build to match that scale. Trafalgar Square is laid out in the 1840s to honor Nelson's naval victories. After the old royal palace burns down, a new Houses of Parliament rises through the 1850s, crowned by the clock tower everyone calls Big Ben, its Gothic silhouette becoming almost instantly the visual shorthand for London itself. In 1851, Hyde Park hosts the Great Exhibition inside the Crystal Palace, an enormous structure of iron and glass that draws 6 million visitors and puts Britain's industrial might on full display to the world. But growth on this scale brings a public health crisis. The Thames itself becomes so polluted with raw sewage that the summer of 1858 is remembered as the Great Stink. The engineer Joseph Bazalgette responds with one of the great civil engineering projects of the era, a vast new sewer network that finally takes waste out of the river. In 1863, London opens the Underground, the world's first subway system. And in 1894, Tower Bridge, with its distinctive twin towers and lifting roadway, opens across the Thames. Yet Victorian London is also a city split brutally in two. The wealthy live in spacious comfort in districts like Mayfair and Belgravia, while the poor are packed into overcrowded East End slums, sometimes a dozen people to a single damp room. Cholera outbreaks killed tens of thousands across the 1830s and 40s, traced, eventually, in 1854, to a single contaminated water pump on Broad Street by a physician whose careful mapping of cases helps found the modern science of epidemiology. Crime is a constant fear. In 1829, Home Secretary Robert Peel sets up London's first organized police force, whose officers earn the nickname Bobbies after him. And in 1888, an unidentified killer murders at least 5 women in Whitechapel, never caught, becoming a lasting symbol of the city's darker underside. Through it all, the era's most famous novelist documents the gap between London's enormous wealth and its grinding poverty, in stories that still shape how the world pictures Victorian London: workhouses, debtors' prisons, children sent into factories and chimneys instead of schools. The 20th century, war and recovery. The First World War strips a generation of young Londoners from the city, though its buildings largely survive intact. The Second World War is different. It brings the fighting directly to London's doorstep. During the Blitz between September 1940 and May 1941, German bombers strike the city almost nightly. Families shelter in underground stations, turning subway platforms into makeshift bedrooms for tens of thousands of people every night. Entire streets vanish overnight. St. Paul's Cathedral survives, its dome rising defiantly above the smoke in photographs that become instant symbols of national resolve. By the war's end, roughly 1 million buildings across London have been damaged or destroyed, and tens of thousands of civilians have lost their lives in the bombing. The post-war city is exhausted and short on money. Rationing drags on into the 1950s. In December 1952, a lethal mix of fog and coal smoke, remembered as the Great Smog, kills an estimated 12,000 people in under a week. But London rebuilds, as it always has. In 1948, a ship brings the first large wave of post-war Caribbean migrants to Britain, beginning a profound and lasting shift in the city's makeup, soon followed by new communities from South Asia and later from Africa, Eastern Europe, and beyond. By the 1960s, London is electric again. Carnaby Street, a cultural moment the press dubs Swinging London. Fashion, music, and design pour out of the city and reshape youth culture across the Western world. The decades that follow are rougher. Economic strain, industrial strikes, and bombing campaigns that hit the city repeatedly through the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. By the 1980s, London's old docklands sit abandoned and the East End feels left behind. Then comes a deliberate reinvention. Canary Wharf rises on the old docks, glass towers replacing derelict warehouses. The financial sector expands rapidly. London today, the new century opens with the Millennium Dome, an expensive, much-mocked flop that eventually finds new life as an arena. London keeps expanding regardless. The 2012 Olympics pour fresh investment and infrastructure into the city's east side, transforming a stretch of former industrial land into parkland, stadiums, and new housing, and the population climbs past 9 million. What defines London now, more than any single monument, is its sheer diversity. Hundreds of languages are spoken across the city on any given day. Distinct neighborhoods each carry their own strong cultural identities, each with its own restaurants, shops, places of worship, and festivals. The skyline keeps shifting too. Modern glass skyscrapers rising alongside churches and palaces that have stood for centuries. Glass and steel set directly against stone laid down hundreds of years earlier. This is the story of London. It has survived Roman withdrawal, Viking raids, the Black Death, the Great Fire, and the Blitz. And every time, it has come back larger, busier, and more varied than before. It was never founded for glory. It was a muddy crossing point that simply refused to stay small. Stand on London Bridge today, and you're standing exactly where Roman soldiers once crossed the Thames for the very first time. The river hasn't changed its course in 2,000 years. Everything around it has changed completely, again and again. And that more than any single building or monument is the real story of London. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for more history videos.